So can an aluminum bike be a supple bike? In this video, I'm going to review the Spooky Gas Mask, an aluminum cross/gravel eating machine. Find out what I like and dislike about it in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you love gravel bikes, 650B bikes, the supple life, then you have found your people. Consider subscribing. And before I jump in, if you guys enjoy these bike reviews or this bikey content, consider supporting the channel in the links in the description below. You can do it via PayPal, via our new Patreon page with lots of cool benefits, or by buying some supple t-shirts. So if you're not familiar with the brand Spooky, they've actually been around for a while in various incarnations. From my understanding, they initially started as a mountain bike brand, then disappeared for a couple years and have come back. US made aluminum bikes. They have a road bike offering, a mountain bike offering, and this gravel/cross offering known as the Gas Mask. While they mostly sell custom or semi-custom frame sets, they did pull together a complete bike for me to review so I can share my thoughts and feelings about it. And while these components will vary depending on your build, I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of them. So the bike has Chris King everything, these pretty sweet pink Chris King hubs, a Chris King headset. The fork is a NV carbon fork. The rims are head Belgium Pluses. The handlebar is a carbon handlebar from Ritchie. The seat post is a Thompson seat post. And the saddle is a Physique curve, which is surprisingly comfortable. For the crankset, it is set up one by with these Cannondale SI cranks, kind of reminiscent of some of the cranks from White Industries. The brakes are hydraulic disc brakes and the shifters are SRAM. And to top it all off, to put that supple cherry in the top, they're finished off with these 38mm Compass tires. So by all accounts, this is not a cheap build, but really does add to the aesthetics of the bike and also the weight. This might be the lightest bike I've had a chance to review for the YouTube channel. All this combined, sans pedals, weighs in at 19.5 pounds. So far cry from lots of the different Q bikes we've reviewed on this channel, which at the lightest come in at about 25 pounds. The frame itself is welded here in the US by Frank the Welder. The welds are nice and tight, and they're your typical stack of dimes welds that you want to see in a nicely fabricated frame. And unlike many of the bikes on this channel, this bike is pretty stripped clean of any abrasions. This is definitely solidly in the go fast category of bikes and less utilitarian or touring oriented. The top tube, I don't know if you can tell from the video, but it is slightly flattened, which is perfect for shouldering the bike if you're racing cross, but also would come in handy if you're going on a long adventure gravel ride and you hit a hike a bike section and want an easy way to carry your bike. So multi-purpose, you can use it for cross racing, but also for gravel exploring. So that's enough for the frame and components. How does this bike ride? So being a aluminum cross bike, I had certain expectations, let's say. Typically, I wouldn't necessarily associate aluminum with a nice and supple ride or cross geometry with something I would want to ride on a long gravel ride. However, this bike does a good job at thwarting both those initial expectations. In terms of the front end handling, I was actually quite surprised at how stable the front end was. Not that it was slow and boring, but usually when I think cross bike, it's something that's a little bit more nervous, a little bit more twitchy in the front. But the front end on this bike does strike a nice balance between responsiveness, but also being laid back enough so if you're going on a long gravel ride, you're not constantly having to micromanage the steering. To me, it sort of reminded me of the front end of the Diverge that I tested recently, but without the future shocks bouncing up and down. So definitely nice crossover handling characteristics in the front. In the rear is where I really enjoyed the bike. It does have a short chainstay. It has that kind of jumpiness, dartiness that I like in bikes like this. When you apply the pressure to the pedals, the bike wants to go. When you climb, the bike surges beneath you. So if you love climbing hills or a fan of Contador, you will like this bike. And together with that jumpy short rear end and that pretty well-mannered front end, it makes for just a nice riding bike in terms of its handling. But is it supple? So this is where I will fully admit it's hard. I try my best to kind of narrow down the variables and see what affects what. So with this particular build and these particular tires, the bike was surprisingly supple. There was definitely a lot more compliance than what I would expect from an aluminum frame. So it was really hard for me to tell if that compliance was in the frame and the fork or in the tire. But let's just say that with this combination, it was a lot smoother and supple ride than I was expecting. So when I had it, I did some paved climbs, some dirt climbs, descending down some pretty chunky double track, and the bike handled it with aplomb and a little rowdiness. Overall, I feel like this bike definitely leans on the performance end of the spectrum. So it's no slouch. You give up some of the utility and braze-ons and what have you. But if you're looking for a fun and playful bike and you want something that you can kind of throw around and accelerate and that climbs really well, then this might be a bike for you. So let's move on to the things I like and dislike about the bike. The first big pro is the geometry and the handling. It's a good balance of being quick and stable at the same time. Another big like is the aesthetics of the bike. Yeah, this is just a pimped out build, and when you buy it, you do have some customizable options. You can really make the bike your own. Another big pro is the bike is fabricated here in the US, so if you want to support a US brand, a US frame builder, then this is a bike to consider. So that's it for the pros. What are the cons? A big kind of barrier that's going to be there for some is the price. There are different tiers of customization, and the price can go, sky's the limit depending on what you want. So by no means is it an inexpensive bike. Let's just get that over with. But if you want a fun handling bike that you can have some say on how it looks, then the Spooky is maybe a bike that you'd consider. Another con is kind of like the lack of braze-ons. I understand this is a performance-oriented machine. It's meant to race and go fast. But I would say it would be nice to have at least some mountings for fenders. So if you make this investment, you can ride it year-round, train on it, ride it during the summer, but also ride it when it gets wet and mucky. So who is this bike for? If you like to go fast and race and want to do a gravel event or cross racing, then this bike is definitely for you. I think if you're looking at a bike like the Diverge but aren't a fan of a bike being all carbon and you want some customizable options, then this bike could also be for you. Overall, it was a fun ride. I'm a big fan of this geometry. I think it's a good balance between that tucked and kind of slack, not exactly slack, that's a bad word for it, but kind of predictable but fun front end. And you know me, if I could improve upon this bike, I'd give it a little bit wider tire clearance to put in 650B by 2.1s, but that's just my preference. So that's it for this video. If you guys have any other questions about this Spooky, leave those in the comments below. Are there any Spooky owners out there? I know that this brand's been around for a while, but I've not seen many of them out on the road. So let me know what you think about your Spooky. And if you enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe. Consider supporting the channel with the PayPal link, the Patreon, or by getting a Supple t-shirt. And until next time, keep the supple side down.